This is from the New York Times. The style section, again. I've read from the style section before. He asked permission to touch, but not to ghost. A culture of consent, this is the byline, a culture of consent, one woman argues, should be less about self-protection and more about genuine care for the other person. By Courtney Sender. Maybe this is the one woman. September 7th, 2018. Leer in Espanol. I'm not going to leer at it in Espanol. If I leer at it in Espanol, will it be okay with them? I don't know. Should I ask for written permission? I don't know. Courtney Sender, please make sense to me. For our first date, he took an Uber to my apartment through a winter storm. As the snow fell outside, we sat close on my couch while he talked touchingly about poetry. 2 hours in, I was hoping he would kiss me, and he did. He was a sweet kisser. For an hour, we sat with his hand cupped behind my ear, kissing and talking. We had met on Tinder. What? I was nearly 30, and he was 24. But our age gap somehow seemed a lot larger than 5 years. Not because he acted especially young. It was more that when it came to sex and foreplay, he acted so differently from guys my age, asking for my consent about nearly everything. So he's been trained by our wonderful school system to ask for consent every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or whip out his app and say, could you please put your fingerprint on here so I have your consent every 10 minutes, or every advance in the ratcheting up of the sexual, passionate embrace. So it appears to me that she likes that he's asking for her permission. I think it gives her a sense of power. I think that's what's going on. Is it okay if we go to the bedroom? He said. And oddly enough, I'm just going to bring this up, oddly enough, she wrote O.K. Not the single word okay, but O.K. I wonder if she's trying to distance herself from this okay into the okay. I wonder if there's an okay. And if he asked the okay when he was asking if it was okay to go to the bedroom. She seems to think so. I smiled and led him there. He tugged at the hem of my sweater and said, is it okay if I take this off? Again, O.K. I nodded. Maybe she just really likes acronyms. Underneath, I was wearing a thin tank top. Can I take this off too? He said. I laughed. Of course. It went off. Hold on. He kissed my collarbone. Right here. I breathed into his neck and pulled off his shirt. Did she not ask okay if it was okay for him? She just violated his okayness. So his consent is assumed because he's the one who's asking it. Therefore, he is the flashing cursor and she is the waiting virgin page with the ability to deny your ink. I think I snorted. That was romantic. When you asked about the sweater, that was my yes, from the waist up. He looked scared. Somewhere in our 5-year age gap, a dramatic shift must have taken place in sexual training. What? Sexual training? Is that a thing? I've never heard of it before. I wonder why there's no romantic song called Sexual Training. What was that song? Sexual healing, baby. But sexual training. You notice that there's no songs about this. I sensed this would be, because a song is by definition, well, a romantic song is not by definition, I'm sorry. A romantic song is the proving of the ability to perform certain behaviors that a woman desires, right? Which is one, I guess, would be being beautiful. But a romantic song or a romantic poem is, in effect, bypassing the need for very explicit technical guidelines in what is okay and what is not okay. If you are beautiful as a man, if you perform in a certain way, you don't have to ask for any of this stuff. And maybe the whole thing with this consent movement, and I'm not talking about rapiness, I'm not talking about creepiness, I'm talking about this whole burgeoning industry, not even industry, this whole burgeoning thought process of having to explicitly ask consent, is that I think by and large it probably turns off the more aesthetically astute women. But all that aesthetic stuff has gone out the window, and now it's been replaced with some sort of technical guidelines of how often you should ask or what you should ask and whether you should say the word okay or if you should make this hand sign or use the acronym. To return to this, what is it? 50 Shades of Okay. I lay down on my bed. He lay beside me. "Is this okay?" he said. "I invited a guy from Tinder to my empty apartment on a snow day," I said. "Let's just assume you have blanket consent." How is he supposed to interpret that? Blanket consent? He needs to have everything in technical language, and you're using a metaphor. "Let's just assume we have blanket consent." And this is what he says. "I'm not comfortable with that." I looked at his earnest eyes, hair flopping into his face, stubble that was already reddening my skin. I had already decided I didn't mind. Hadn't I already said yes several times? Wasn't I lying there with him, my leg tossed over his, my whole body arcing toward him? He raised my arm above my head, put his lips to the soft skin of my inner arm, and licked me from armpit to elbow. I pulled my arm away. "Is that okay?" he said. "Are you okay?" I had been single and sexually active for more than a decade. Single and sexually active. Bing, 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 bing. And considered myself to be sexually liberated. But I could not remember anyone having done that to me. "It's just really intimate," I said. "Wait, hold on. Wait, he had blanket consent, and now you're withdrawing that because of some saliva." Okay, that is a little weird. But anyways, you gave him blanket consent, and then you completely dashed his, go wild, son. I think she's toying with this man. Imagine the pressure of his... Now he was the one who laughed. "That's intimate?" he said. "Yes," I said, "it is." He and I seemed to have such different understandings of which acts were assumed to be acceptable and which required voiced consent, because they don't know each other. At one point, he put his hand on my throat and asked if the pressure was okay. "I'll tell you if I die," I joked. How is he supposed to read your humor? A freaking algorithm thrust you into bed. You and the algorithm and your consent thrust you into bed with this man. At another point, he kissed me from forehead to toe and said, "I think that's everywhere." And I almost told him that was unfair. He hadn't asked my consent. Although I would say yes to all manner of sexual touching, that much sweetness had the power to break my heart. So now she's feeling something. She's not just feeling something, she's feeling something. At the end of the night, he said, "See you soon," and took an Uber back to his apartment through the snow. Afterward, I sat in bed thinking about the encounter. I knew I had been a little dismissive of all his asking, but in fact, I had liked it as a form of caretaking. I just wasn't used to being taken care of in that way. Sex makes me feel unsafe. Not because of the act itself, but because my partners so often despair afterward, whether I waited hours or months before the first time. So it's after sex when I feel truly vulnerable. And yet she keeps on having sex with many people and stays single. Yet something else about his asking also made me feel uneasy. It seemed legalistic and self-protective, imported more from the courtroom than from a true sense of caretaking. And each time he asked, it was as if he assumed I lacked the agency to say no on my own, as if he expected me to say no, not believing that a woman would have the desire to keep saying yes. I guess it's the extension of the mating dance into keeping the frontal lobes always engaged in the physical act, always pinging these frontal lobes. Are you okay? Are you present? Are you here with me? Are you here with me? Are we here together? Are we okay together? And that's what this whole consent movement is. It's a bringing of this certain part of ourselves, which is our consensual part, the one that signs the check, the one that says, okay, I put my name on this decision. It's bringing all that up into the entire entire sexual act, not just the initiation, but every step along the way. What does that do to that entire act? But bring it into no power remains in my video, but that's okay. We're going to go into lo-fi. What does that do when all of that consensuality is brought to bear into the physical act? When you have to constantly sign a check? What is that? It's a different wavelength. It's a completely different activity. It's a different region of being. Still, I liked that he was trying to keep from hurting me unawares. He texted that night reassuringly. Don't end a sentence on an adverb. That's just a rule of thumb. Don't do it always, but try not to do it. I decided I would call his asking lovely. I decided I would try to learn. The second time he was in my bedroom, he paused with his hand at the zipper of my dress. "Is this okay?" he said. I looked at him in the eye. He didn't laugh. I said yes. He unzipped it, and I slid on top of him, kissed him, started unbuckling his belt. His hips were arcing toward me, but I paused. "Learn," I told myself. I said, "Is this okay?" He was taken aback. "I ask you that," he said. "Why?" "Because I'm the one who could make you do something you don't want to do," he said, "not vice versa." This was likely untrue, physically speaking. He was a head taller than me and probably twice as strong. If he wanted to hold me down against my will, he could have. But that wasn't what he was trying to do. He and I were enjoying a mutual desired sexual experience, and by making that distinction, he was importing the language of coercion and assault into sex that was healthy. Now, 1, tender, healthy, maybe not. 2, maybe she's getting to the point that I've been trying to make about this whole consensuality culture. Not necessarily being that deep of a culture, but keeping everything on the surface. Given our wholly consensual interaction, did it matter who was stronger? Couldn't we treat each other as two equal human beings, each of whom had invited and agreed to intimate acts? I think actually she's saying that now she feels offended that he felt asking it was okay was actually his form of taking control, and she wants that control back, but not by playing his game, but by playing a further game, by saying, "Why don't you treat me equally? Why can't I be the one to rape you? Why do you think that you're so much better and stronger and more powerful than me, when really, it's me? And I will prove it to you by doing an extra 2 loop-de-loops through these brain region structure-isms of progressive activity." Sorry, I ran out of sentences. Then I had to make something up. Wasn't that the beautiful thing he was teaching me? That we could be fully human to each other. Fully human, tender. Checking in, honoring yes, and respecting no. My hand hovered above his belt. Imagine the pressure of his... Finally, he smiled and said yes. And the evening continued. If I could go back in time, I would have urged him in that moment to really think about why asking for consent even matters. Because the answer, I think, is basic. We want people we're intimate with to feel good, not bad. Intimate. Tender. Tender. Oh, I get it. I finally freaking get it. I always thought tender was about just the spark. Just like the freaking match head and a little bit of like stuff and it's done, right? But no, she wants it to be tender, as in, like what you do to your meat that you're using to eat with a partner over a nice dinner, some candles, nice things to continue. While he was waiting for his Uber to arrive, he said he would cook me dinner next time. Steak, oh, here we go, tenderized meat. Steak with sauteed mushrooms and a fig balsamic reduction. That seems made up to me. I mostly make scrambled eggs. This also seems made up, I said. He laughed, kissed me, and said, "See you soon." I did not see him soon. I texted him a few times in the days that followed, playfully at first, then more pressing. No, she didn't write pressingly. I think her editor probably put that one out of the pasture. Sorry, I'm running out of words. It's Friday. It's been a long week. He ignored me. At first, I couldn't believe he didn't answer. And then I was devastated. My roommates didn't understand why I was so much more hurt than usual. Because he kissed the soft part of my arm, I said, and then he licked me. No, disappeared. They looked at me blankly. Because he asked for my consent over and over and over again, so sex felt like a sacred act, and then he disappeared. A sacred act? One roommate said, laughing. Girl, you sure don't treat it like one. Ow, okay, maybe she really is realizing something, or maybe this is just fan fiction, 50 Shades of Okay. That was pretty good. You have to admit that. I'm probably going to title that, but that'll ruin the joke. So, girl, you sure don't treat it like one, like a sacred act, but I do. We perform sacred acts for, with, and among strangers all the time. Wait. We give charitably to people we don't know, okay. We pray in churches with people we don't know, okay. We put our genitals into people that might create another entire new human being with people we don't know, right? And all those things are on a continuum, right? When he asked so many times about my desires, when he checked to be sure he was honoring and respecting me, then sex, however short-lived, became a reciprocal offering. But the moment we pulled on our jeans, that spell of reciprocal honor and respect was broken, which is fine, my roommate said. And she was right, in a way. Asking about my feelings during sex didn't extend to caring about them after sex. Consent is not a contract of continuation. Beautiful sentence. Beautiful sentence. But in the days and weeks after, I was left thinking that our culture's current approach to consent is too narrow. A culture of consent should be a culture of care for the other person, of seeing and honoring another's humanity and finding ways to engage in sex while keeping our humanity intact. So she wants to extend a relationship that involves sex through time. Maybe there's a word for that. I don't know, marriage, maybe. It should be a culture of making each other feel good, not bad. Okay, and then she destroys it all about making about feelings. Maybe it's not about feelings. Maybe it's about, understanding how feelings give way to other things, how feelings cause certain behaviors, but they don't last. And those behaviors and the consequences of those behaviors do. And if that's the goal, then consent doesn't work if we relegate it exclusively to the sexual realm. Our bodies are only one part of the complex constellation of who we are. To base our culture of consent on the body alone is to expect that caretaking involves only the physical. You notice she's really putting a lot of emphasis on caretaking. She wants to be taken care of. I think there's kind of a contract that encapsulates that. I love all these C's. I wish we could view consent as something that's less about caution and more about care for the other person, the entire person, both during an encounter and after, when we're often at our most vulnerable. Because I don't think many of us would say yes to the question, is it okay if I acted like I care about you and then disappear or ask you to go away? Maybe, baby. Styles, modern love. What do you think this is about? What do you think this is about? Tell me.
What were the 5 categories of most desirable male entity used most broadly in female pornography? Oh, it's so embarrassing. Women, you have to cover your head while I say this. Vampire, werewolf, billionaire, surgeon, and pirate.